Hi, I'm B. Welcome back to episode 11 of Wreck This Journal. If you've been following along, you know that I'm using this book for art prompts and experimentation. The first pages that I'm working on today are pages 50 and 51, Make a Paper Airplane. I cannot believe that I made it to 50 pages in this book already. Like, in some ways, it feels like I've been working on this book for forever, and in other ways, it feels like I have barely touched this book, but I'm already 50 pages in, and it's so exciting. I don't know. I feel like I need to go through and name my top five of the 50 or something like that. But I had such a great idea for Make a Paper Airplane. I knew before I started planning any of it that I wanted to make a mini paper airplane and have it put on a fishing line across the page. So it looks like somebody is throwing a paper airplane and having it go in some direction. So that way I could physically move the paper airplane and it can be, one of those interactive type pages that I am becoming so fond of. So I sat down and I doodled a whole bunch of different options for how I wanted the paper airplane to go, and I settled upon the idea of this library setting. I wanted it to feel a little bit magical. I wanted it to feel very soft and feminine and beautiful. And when I was envisioning this idea, I was seeing multiple chambers and having paper airplanes flying from different chambers to different people or different characters. But ultimately, I decided that might have been a bit too complex. This was already very complex for the amount of undersketching I had to create, and I was doing point perspective, so I had to make sure it all went to the right point and all of that stuff. So it was quite a lot to figure out exactly how I wanted everything to do, to make sure that the perspectives were correct on all of my angles and things like that, to make it look very library-esque, I guess, to make it look proper. I know I wanted this library to be magical. I wanted it to have some glowing aspects in it. So I wanted, certain parts to look like they're hidden lanterns or hidden lights among the books. I wanted this beautiful window to have a glowing effect as well. I just wanted it all to seem a little bit beautiful in that way. A cliche thing, I feel like it's almost a requirement for a magical area, for anything that is supposed to be magical. It has those pieces floating in the sky. It has sparkles on things. It has glowing things that are flowing down, like flowing plants or water or things like that. I feel like those are requirements for a magical composition. And I tried a bunch of different ideas of different characters that would be tossing the paper airplane. Some of them were tossing it into a fountain, and some of them were tossing it back and forth between each other and playing a game of catch of sorts with the paper airplane. And then I decided I had this need to create this beautiful magical library. I was like, well, one person could be reading and then the other person could be bored and making paper airplanes. And that's how I came across these sisters, or how my brain decided that I should create these sisters and have it be slightly before their bedtime. So I was trying to put them I have them in nightgowns and just have them, one is wanting to read, the other one is wanting to make mischief. And I thought it was a very cute idea. I also liked the idea of having a bunch of hidden paper airplanes all across the composition, and just have several in here. There are 15 paper airplanes in this composition. Part of me wishes I had created or added some more, but I do think 15 is quite a lot to go out and seek out if you are interested in doing so. I think it's quite cute having all of those hidden adorable things to show the little bit of chaos that there was with these girls. I do have bird cages in the corner, and originally I was going to add in some birds flying around as well, but ultimately I had spent so much time with my undersketch. It took me an entire 8 hours just to do my undersketch because of all the details and all the leaves on the plants and all of the things like that. Before I could add the ink on top, I had to make sure that I had a clear idea of the undersketching, so that way I can make sure I'm not putting lines on top of leaves or on top of books or whatever. That ultimately at that point, all of my ideas after 8 hours of undersketching, I was like, we're done. I had so many more ideas I wanted to add. I wanted to add some kicked off slippers a few places. I wanted to add a teddy bear that had been dropped recklessly on the floor, sort of abandoned. I wanted to add birds flying around from the bird cages. I wanted to make each one of the lights distinct and separate. I wanted to add a lot more lines for the books instead of just this hint of books in the background, that there was, a distinction between the books and things like that. I wanted it to be so much more, but that was going to take another whole day probably to go through and make sure all of those things were correct and up to like the standard that I was holding myself to for this piece. And I knew it was going to take another full day just to do the watercolors because you have to wait for watercolors to dry between layers. And and I did. I spent an entire day watercoloring this and finishing it off and adding the paper airplane. I do think ultimately that all of the time that I spent on this page was worth it because these pages turned out so beautifully. They are definitely more intricate than most of the compositions previous to them, but it was definitely worth it to end up with such a beautiful result. The next pages that I'll be working on today are pages 52 and 53, Wrap Something, with this page. Okay, so for this page, I knew that I wanted to create a simpler design for this page because I spent so much on the previous two pages. I also knew I wanted to create some sort of origami box or pop-up or something along those lines. And so after Googling, I realized that they have this origami box envelope. It folds down flat, but then when you open it up, it creates kind of a box that you can hide things in. And I thought that would be perfect to wrap something in that could act as like a present. So on one page, I'm just going to create that box, and on the other page I'm going to create a design with whatever present I decide to put inside of the box. The first part of the box is that I need to create, whatever the wrapping paper was going to be. If I owned wrapping paper, I may have just used the wrapping paper to create the box, but I do not own wrapping paper, so I just used a piece of computer paper, which is really thin, and created a watercolor design across it, and let that dry before folding it into this origami box envelope. I did modify it some. Once I had it folded, I took the top tabs and I cut them off. Once it was on there, I decided I did need at least a little bit of tab on there. So I cut out part of the tabs that I had cut off and I glue it on. And just so it adds an easy access tab to be able to pull the box open and have it look a bit more finished. Inside of this box, I decided I want to create a little book. So I used the leftover part of the page that I had watercolored and I just cut that up and I folded it into, a little book, adding a little binding to glue in. And it created this adorable little tiny folded book. For now, I'm going to leave the book empty and just put it in there with the tissue paper as like sort of a gift wrapping. And then since this is a book, I thought, being wrapped up in a blanket and snuggling up with a good book next to a window that has a beautiful view. So I create this person, just snuggled up in their cocoon of blankets with some, decorative lighting and some beautiful greenery in the background. I decided to add the stars hanging down just because I needed, the length of the composition. I wanted more of a pattern as well between the top and the bottom, just to have more eye movement basically throughout the composition. This is a very, very simple piece. Quite obviously, it's a very simple sketch. I did consider using the wrapped envelope and like drawing a picture inside of the square. That would look really awesome too, to have some sort of like something hidden, some sort of adventure hidden inside of that wrapping paper. But I quite like the book, and I think that these two pages, though simple, are quite pretty, and they do have that interactive element to them that I am finding myself enjoying. So I definitely enjoy these pages. Both of the pages today, I decided to work with watercolors. I really enjoy watercolors, except for, how long they take to dry in between layers. And like, I'm relatively new to watercolors. Like, I don't have a ton of experience with them. And so, just playing with them is just fun because I learn so much. Each time that I create something new, I'm learning something new. I think all the pages I created today ended up quite beautiful. They have interactive elements to them, which I love. It was the fun watercolors, which I also love. And it just, there was a lot of joy, a lot of hard work over this week of like working on these things and a lot of time, but also a lot of joy went into these artworks. And I think it shows. Anyway, if you're following along, I'll see y'all next week. Bye.